The museum is an extraordinary combination of an intense informational dive for experts of the history and a brilliant introduction as history to the less informed. In a philosophical sense, as the museum came together, how were you able to achieve that spectrum?
That's a great question. Certainly, the founders of this museum were aware that what drew people here was the assassination itself. But the reason it mattered was because of who John F. Kennedy was and what he stood for. Right. When we opened 35 years ago last month, we just had our 35th anniversary. When we opened in February of '89, at that time, about a third of our visitors were not alive at the time of the assassination. Of course, that number is completely flip-flopped. I mean, right. Well over 2/3 of our visitors today were not alive in '63. Yeah. So there's always been, from the very beginning, this need to establish context. It's not just a murder that happened in broad daylight that was captured on film. It was the extinguishing of an entire generation's hope for the future. The assassination is seen by so many as a watershed that defined a generation and ushered in all the violence and skepticism that permeated the 1960s. So trying to find a way to get people to invest themselves in that journey so that by the time they reach that window and look out onto the landscape of Dealey Plaza, they can understand what was lost and why it impacted people in that way, was of paramount significance to our founders. At the same time, you certainly got people who have immersed themselves in the culture of the assassination, reading the thousands of books, watching the hundreds of documentaries, and then you've got school kids right. who don't really cover Kennedy in their history books right. at all. And right. so this is their introduction to the assassination. Navigating that is a challenge. It's a persistent challenge as our audience shifts and as memory fades into history. But fundamentally, a site like Dealey Plaza, just like Pearl Harbor and the Murrah Building in Oklahoma City and the footprint of the World Trade Center, these sites that are stained by violence and tragedy provide us an opportunity to do justice to tragic events like this by remembering them properly. And within that integrity of memory, you can serve two audiences very well. You can serve those who have a particular passion for this subject, who are emotionally invested already right. in the story of Kennedy and the assassination. And you can also introduce that subject matter to people who are going to be far more fascinated with the CSI aspects of the assassination, the ballistics evidence, right, the medical evidence. Right. But a place like this, touched by history, allows us to serve both of those audiences in their own unique ways.